Here's the brief news from the world over this week. On Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a Texas law that required abortion clinics to meet the standards of surgical centers and demanded that abortion doctors have admitting privileges at nearby hospitals. In the Texas case, Justice Anthony Kennedy sided with the court's liberal justices in finding that the state had placed an undue burden on women seeking abortions. Texas argued that the requirements made abortions safer. Several Texas abortion clinics closed after the law came into effect since they were unable to comply with the regulations. The decision was one of 4 pro-life defeats in the U.S. High Court. Similar laws were struck down in Wisconsin and Mississippi on Tuesday. And after a 10-year legal saga, conscientiously objecting pharmacists in Washington lost their battle not to dispense the contraceptive drug, Plan B, and other similar abortifacient drugs. The court rejected without comment their appeal, challenging the state's created law. And the special U.S. House Committee on Benghazi has concluded its 2-year investigation of the 2012 terror attack on the U.S. consulate in Libya. The final 800-page report released Tuesday spreads blame across the Obama administration for security lapses that led to the deaths of 4 Americans. The committee faults the Central Intelligence Agency for missing the warning signs of the attack, the Defense Department for failing to respond during the attack, and Hillary Clinton's State Department for failing to protect American diplomats. Committee Chairman Republican Trey Gowdy said there was a clear disconnect between the evolving crisis on the ground in Benghazi and what officials thought was happening. And it was another week of terror on Tuesday. 3 suicide attackers carried out a deadly siege at Turkey's Ataturk airport in Istanbul. The coordinated attacks in the arrival halls and nearby parking lot killed at least 43 and injured more than 200. Turkish officials say Chechens trained in the Syrian ISIS stronghold of Raqqa were involved. The attackers first opened fire and then detonated themselves, maximizing carnage and damage. More than 20 have since been arrested in an ongoing investigation. In an exclusive interview with Yahoo News, CIA Director John Brennan warned of an Istanbul-type attack in the U.S., saying that as an intelligence professional, he's worried about the capabilities of ISIS and their determination to kill as many people as possible with attacks abroad. He added that he'd be surprised if Daesh is not trying to carry out that kind of attack in the United States. Meanwhile, the Taliban's escalating terror campaign continues in Afghanistan. At least 30 were killed when a suicide bomber hit a police convoy just outside Kabul. The terror group is responsible for more than 600 deaths this year. And it's a horse race indeed in the race for the White House. After being down, Donald Trump has taken a surprising lead over Hillary Clinton. The latest Rasmussen Report survey of likely voters has the presumptive Republican nominee leading his Democratic counterpart 43 to 39%. The same poll last week had it flipped, with Clinton up 44 to 39. Other polls have Trump and Clinton in a dead heat, or Clinton in the lead by as much as 10 points. Trump has been stagnating since April, hovering around 40%. More on the presidential race and all the latest from the Beltway later in the show. And it was the vote heard around the world. The British vote for independence from the European Union, better known as Brexit, has sent political shockwaves across the globe. Within the UK, Prime Minister David Cameron, who was on the losing side of the campaign, has stepped down, claiming that new leadership is now needed to guide the country into its post-EU future. And former London mayor and leader of the Brexit movement, Boris Johnson, will not run for Prime Minister. Once considered a favorite to replace outgoing PM David Cameron, Johnson removed himself from consideration on Thursday, saying he would instead lend his support to the next Tory leader.
My role will be to give every possible support to the next Conservative administration to make sure that we properly fulfil the mandate of the people that was delivered at the referendum and to champion the agenda I believe in. To stick up for the forgotten people of this country.
Johnson's candidacy appeared to have been dealt a fatal blow earlier in the day when Michael Gove, the former Justice Secretary and ally of Johnson, announced that he would seek the position. In his announcement speech, Gove said Mr. Johnson could not provide the leadership or build the team for the task ahead. And several of the church's leading prelates weighed in on Britain's desire for independence. Aboard the papal flight returning to Rome from Armenia on Sunday, Pope Francis said the will of the British people should be respected, but warned against a new balkanization of Europe. German Cardinal Reinhard Marx was a bit more defiant than the Pope. Speaking in his capacity as head of the European Bishops' Conferences, Marx said the Brexit was extremely disappointing, and he called for a strengthening of the EU. Meanwhile, Cardinal Vincent Nichols of London appears concerned over a new jingoism after the Brexit vote. Commenting on reports of insulting posters directed at immigrants, he fumed, "This upsurge of racism, of hatred toward others, is something we must not tolerate," end quote. And Pope Francis made global headlines once again this week, saying the Church should apologize to gays who have felt marginalized and disrespected. Aboard the papal plane, the Pope was asked to respond to remarks made by, once again, German Cardinal Reinhard Marx, who had called on the Church and society as a whole to apologize to gays and lesbians for mistreatment and discrimination. The Pope cited the Catechism, saying homosexual persons must be treated with respect, distinguishing between orientation, which he described as a condition, and homosexual acts. Echoing one of his most famous lines, Francis said, quote, "The problem is a person that has a condition that has goodwill and who seeks God. Who are we to judge?" End quote. After saying the Church should apologize for the mistreatment of gays and others, Francis clarified, adding, "When I say the Church, I mean Christians. Christians must ask forgiveness for not having accompanied so many choices, so many families." To make all of this even more convoluted, South African Cardinal Wilfred Napier issued a rather pithy tweet on the subject of Cardinal Marx's original call for an apology. He wrote, "God help us, next we'll have to apologize for teaching that adultery is a sin. Political correctness, PC, is today's major heresy." Are you confused? Welcome to the club. And Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI celebrated his 65th year of priesthood in an historic Vatican ceremony on Tuesday. Pope Francis was joined by the entire Vatican Curia to celebrate the anniversary in the Clementine Hall of the Apostolic Palace. While Francis presided, Benedict XVI stole the show by delivering unscripted words of thanks to Pope Francis for allowing him to live out his last years in the serenity of the Vatican gardens. The Pope Emeritus said, quote, "Thank you, Holy Father, for your goodness, which from the first moment of your election has struck every day of my life," end quote. During the ceremony, Francis addressed Benedict as Your Holiness, lauding his 65 years of service to the Church. And I am so pleased that so many of you have put Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls, on your summer reading lists. Over the past week, I've met such incredible readers of all ages. Hundreds of you came to Santa Clara, California for the Elevate Conference. I was delighted to be there. And the other night in McLean, Virginia at the Barnes & Noble signing, it was just awesome. My thanks to all of you for embracing the books and the author. Keep checking RaymondArroyo.com for more tour dates and info on Will Wilder and all my books.